I have had an enduring 25-year relationship with the Hill School, which means I have given the incredible honor and somewhat daunting task, even for someone who talks for a living, of introducing Kathleen Devaney, and then later in the evening, Kay and David Dougherty. And they're the ones you really want to hear, so I will make this as brief as I can and still get my words in, which you know I will do, those of you who know me. There's an experience that I think everyone in the room will recognize. It happens at various times in our lives, sometimes just when we're shopping, sometimes when we're trying to figure out which book to read next. Thank you. Yeah, the music. We don't need the music. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Sometimes when you're just trying to figure out what book to read next or what movie to watch, or sometimes when you're going through a challenging time in your life or really struggling with things. And that experience is amazingly just the perfect object, the text, the film, the person you most needed to meet, the food you really were longing for, whatever it is, you didn't know what it was. But suddenly it was there, and you realize that when it is, you have that, this is exactly what I needed right now. This is that moment. This is that perfect match. Well, I have to say that on behalf of my colleagues and students, that since Kathleen Devaney's first interview visit here a year ago in the fall, and then her appointment and her arrival, there have been innumerable versions of that comment being made throughout the Hill community. This is just, she is just what we needed. Kathleen came to us after 30 years of boarding school life, first at Deerfield and then 25 years at Westminster School with her husband, Mark Decanter. She was a teacher, coach, dorm parent, administrator, and all the things that actually when you're looking for school people, you are really hoping that they have had that experience. They have lived the life. They know what it's like to get up and teach on a Saturday morning, to get on a bus and go 2 or 3 hours and coach a game, to come back and be on dorm duty that night, and probably have an advisor who has a medical or disciplinary crisis over that night too, with probably the parents you least wanted to talk to. Kathleen was, as has been and is in her heart of hearts, a history teacher. She's been a lacrosse coach, among other things. In fact, she and I realized last year in my living room, experienced historical analysts that both of us are, that we had met before. And we had met through a Hill connection. The one and only H. Wayne Curtis, who was the Hill athletic director, who ran a spring break lacrosse camp in Cocoa Beach, Florida. And in the early years of Coeducation, we took the very first couple of Hill girls lacrosse teams to Cocoa Beach. And some of those people, survivors, are still here, right? Yes, okay, good. And at the same time, Kathleen was taking the Westminster team down, and I probably really badly officiated one of the games that they were. I kept explaining to Wayne that I'm not an official, I am a coach and a player, and those are not the same things. But those of you who know Wayne know that didn't go over very well. Okay, so at Westminster, Kathleen's responsibilities including being assistant head of school, dean of students, director of student life. She was a founding director of Horizons at Westminster. She was the mother of Emmett and Samantha, which I can tell you was also quite a job and quite a privilege, having gotten to meet them. But through it all, Kathleen was a committed, practicing teacher of history and teacher of life, as all great school people are. So she was a history teacher and a lacrosse coach. You can probably figure there was a certain amount in common that she and I felt like we had. Kathleen got her BA at Bowdoin College, her Master's of Arts and Liberal Studies at Dartmouth. She was a Fulbright Fellow in Germany, did a little time in corporate banking, but realized that teaching was what she really wanted to be doing. So she went to Deerfield, where fortunately she met Mark Decanter, who was teaching across the street, more or less, for those of you who know Deerfield, Massachusetts. Someone who some of us affectionately still call Double D, who you'll be hearing about from a little bit later tonight, used to point out to the Hill School at least once a year, when he was headmaster, that the highest honor one can ever bestow on another human being is to call them a great teacher. I hope I didn't steal that totally, David, but there you go. Great schools during their great periods are run by great teachers, by those who are called with passion to their work and who recognize, cultivate, and respect that passion in others, but can also do that with absolute clear-sightedness, able to make difficult and challenging decisions, and help identify both students and adults who should be encouraged, and some of whom probably need to find another place to be the next couple of years of their lives. All of this is part of what that job is. And the great ones do it by finding energizing joy in the work, even at its most difficult times. So ladies and gentlemen, it's really my honor to introduce to you Kathleen Devaney, who was exactly what the Hill deserved.
Wow, thank you, Kathy. I gotta tell you, look around the room, and this is just amazing. This warms, I'm sure it warms everyone's hearts, and it just warms my heart. A thought in the air, and then to have this be the creation, there's just joy. There's joy in the air, and thank you to all of you who are here. So, starting just basically, I really hope you've enjoyed the start of this weekend. Here we are with a little rain, but that's all right. Good company is nothing in the face of rain. So here we are, and joy is in the air. But before I go too far, I want to share with you how we got to this weekend. So back in the fall, on the heels of the Trailblazer Brunch, featuring a wonderful talk by Dr. Kathy Malone, several of us started to ask the question, is there an interest in and energy for a standalone celebration of 25 years of coeducation at Hill? And so we reached out to current female faculty and staff who are employed at Hill or were students during the first 5 years of coeducation. And we also reached out to Hill's female trustees as well. And then in December, 18 of us gathered in a room and on Zoom to talk. And I asked the group, should we throw a party for the women of Hill? A question I thought would take most of the meeting. But almost instantly, it was clear that the answer was a resounding yes. And here are some sound bites from the conversation that followed. It should be a party, completely distinct from reunion. It should be all hands as far as reaching out to classmates, former faculty, advisees, friends, teammates, etc. The event should highlight Hill today, and we should showcase our amazing alumnae to our current students. We really need to celebrate all 89 women who stepped onto the campus as students in the fall of 1998. Well, check, 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 check. So the excitement in the room was palpable, and I knew that for this event to succeed, we needed the exact right person to lead the effort. Someone who could take the mantle, manage the very difficult job of organizing committees, creating and planning scheduled, and Courtney Steltz's niece was the woman I hoped would do it. And early that next week, I asked Courtney to lead this initiative, and without hesitation, as she does, she said yes. And since then, Courtney and so many other women have poured their hearts and souls into planning this weekend, and I would really love us to take a moment to thank Courtney and everyone else who made this possible. Courtney, on behalf So now, oh, I need my glass, sorry. And now, to all who are in the room, and to those who are not able to be with us tonight, I would like to raise a toast. A toast to you. As the 12th head of the Hill and the first female head of Hill, I am forever grateful to you, to all of you, for your courage, your strength, your talent, your intelligence, your beautiful spirit, your stubbornness, your endurance. And on behalf of Hill, I thank you. Cheers. I love it, nice, that's right. So 89 of you, we like it. 89 of you stepped onto the campus in the fall of 1998. The school size was 426. 13 sixth formers were women or girls in the class out of 125 sixth formers. 23 fifth formers were girls in a class of 111 here today, nice. 24 fourth formers in a class of 100, excellent. And 29 third formers in a class of 90. Yeah, and you too. There were people cheering you on. There were reporters. And there were some students and some alums, and perhaps even some faculty who did not want you here. But you kept walking. Day one was one thing, year one another, then two, then three, then four, then so on. And all of you in this room kept walking forward. And much of it was good, but much of it was also so hard. Hill had opened their arms to you, but that did not make it easy. Some of you have told me you experienced bullying and name-calling and body shaming and harassment and more. And on behalf of Hill, I am sorry. And I thank you for continuing to walk forward. Every day you were here, you made Hill better. And oh, how we could list the ways. And to name one, Hill opens its doors to a broader community of people flush with talent and courage. And admission records attest to this. For the 1998-1999 school year, Hill received 425 applications with a selectivity rate of 61%. For the 23-24 school year, Hill received 1,158 applications with a selectivity rate of 24%. And of note, the first ever female alumnae, that's redundant, the first ever alumnae children are part of the class of 2027. Ashley Middleton Fraunheiser's son, Brody, and Courtney Steltz's niece's daughter, Mackenzie. Huge. So when I visited the Hill for my interview in December of 2022, I spent 2.5 really long days on the campus, and I was asked many questions. So many that I really don't remember many individual moments, but I do remember one, and one that got me pretty worked up. I was in the Saunders room for the second hour-long question and answer session with the faculty, and someone asked me, do you think it will be hard for a woman to be the first head of the Hill School? Now, in fairness, I believe this faculty member asked me the question not because he wanted to scare me or throw me off. I think he was an ally. And in a way, I think his intent in asking the question was to give me the opportunity to share my thoughts on the topic with everyone else in the room. Still, I got pretty worked up, and then I got going. Because leading a school is about leading a school. Coeducation at Hill is 25 years old. At 25, coeducation is an adult. Coeducation has gone through puberty, it has graduated high school, it has attended college, and it has its first job. Hill is Hill. And in 2024, we do not need to keep measuring ourselves by how many years have passed since we have been something else. So my answer, I don't think that leading Hill as a woman is hard. Leading Hill is an honor, and being the first woman to lead it, well, I'm only here enjoying this honor because of all of you. I will leave you with this one thought, one I've shared with many of you, but I believe the sentiment resonates. In February of 2023, a month after I had been announced as the next head of the Hill School, I was back at my desk at Westminster School, and I saw that the Hill girls ice hockey team was playing the Canterbury School in New Milford, Connecticut, and I really wanted to go watch them. So I traveled to Canterbury, and I watched from the stands as Hill went from winning handily to almost losing. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to sneak out of here because if they lose, my surprise appearance might be construed as bad luck, and that's just no way to start a tenure. So luckily, Hill pulled it out. I went over to congratulate the coaches, and Mr. Ari Baum insisted I go in and say a few words to the team. And I tried to resist, thinking, what could they want with me? They just won. They're about celebrating with each other. But I did as asked, and I walked into the locker room. And as soon as the girls saw me, they started cheering, "We love women at Hill. We love women at Hill." Now, I have been a coach for 31 years. I have played high school and college sports at great and supportive co-ed institutions, and I have never been in a locker room or in any other space when ever even thought to begin such a chant. I smiled the whole way home, and I'm smiling now just thinking about those girls, the message they were sending me, themselves, their parents, their coaches, and even Canterbury School. They were saying, girls are smart, girls are talented, girls are fun and funny. They were saying girls take up space at Hill, girls laugh at Hill, girls thrive at Hill, and Hill is thriving because of the incredible girls and boys who make up the student body at Hill. We love women at Hill. To everyone in this room, thank you for doing the work, for walking forward, for standing tall, and for allowing us to see farther and more clearly because we have stood on your shoulders and as a result are able to deliver an incredible student experience for all members of the Hill student body. Thank you. Could I call Reverend Ann Comfort-Martins to come up to offer us a blessing? Thank you.
I just realized I don't think I've ever said grace while wearing a fascinator, so still new experiences. Let us pray. Oh God, you are our help in ages past and our hope for years to come. We gather this evening in thanksgiving for the devoted lives who paved the road for coeducation at the Hill. We gather this evening in thanksgiving for our own journeys along that road over the past 25 plus years. We remember all the ways in which we were challenged and tested. We learned and played, we loved, and we grew. For what has been, we give thanks. For what is to come, we give thanks. For the meal we are about to share and those with whom we are about to share it, we give thanks. Amen.
It is a real honor, but it's also a daunting task to introduce Kay and David Dougherty to this group. I mean, how can I possibly do justice to them? I was going to ask them earlier, a couple days ago, in what order they plan to speak, and I decided not to do that because one of the things I really want to stress is the partnership that is the essence of Kay and David, and was the essence in so many ways to what why they played the role they did, why they were the people they were at the Hill School for the 19 years that we were fortunate enough to have them here. I was not there for the early years. I thought about Hill. Here's a name I'm going to throw out, and some of you trustees and some of those who have been around a while will recognize it. When I was up at Brooks in the early 1990s in Massachusetts, I had a student named Reed Pritchett. And I got to know Reed Pritchett's father, Gordy Pritchett, very well. And since I was a Philadelphia girl, I would occasionally needle Gordy Pritchett by saying, so Gordy, when is Hill going to do it? Come on. When is it going to go co-ed? And of course, Gordy being Gordy, for those of you who knew him, his answer was in actually verbatim, when hell freezes over. So it was most appropriate that he ended up being the member of the Board of Trustees who was the supervisor of the strategic plan that ended up making the decision to go co-ed, which I think Dick and Dave, you probably can verify that. Betty's shaking, yeah. So when I saw in the back of the New York Times Magazine, this is ancient technology for many of you, they used to have these little education and camp ads in the back of the New York Times Magazine. And I opened it one day, and there was a female lacrosse player picture, this tiny little ad, and it said, the Hill School is inviting girl applicants. And I remember starting to cry, actually. But I wrote a letter, just blindly wrote a letter to David Dougherty later that year, because he was the head of school. I had no idea who David Dougherty was. And when I got an interview invitation, from David himself, I may say, I called up Gordy Pritchett, and we used to call people up. You actually talked to them, you didn't text them and things. And I called Gordy at Babson, where he was teaching math, and I said, I guess hell has frozen over because I'm flying to Philadelphia tomorrow. So, when I got to Philadelphia, I was picked up by none other than Kenny Mauger, who was, of course, the first person at the Hill School I met. Again, some of these names, just bear with us younger people, but these names, Kenny Mauger picked me up. And then I had a succession of interviews and dinners and things with these people over the next day and a half. And I think you'll begin to see a pattern here. Tom Ruth, who was the head of the history department, Rick Hilton, who was the assistant head for academics, Matt Ralston, who was the director of studies, Greg Buckles, who's the director of admissions, Jim Pugh, who was the chief financial officer, Wayne Curtis, who was the athletic director, Larry Philippone. Are you beginning to see a pattern here in gender terms at all? This is what getting hired at Hill meant. You spent these were all male people, wonderful people, but they were all male people. The history department, who I had lunch with, were Pete Maynard, Jim Rice-Snyder, Chris Drown. I mean, it was, fortunately, I'd spent some time in New Haven. Nancy wasn't here at that point. I heard about her. She was a legend. And these people all did keep mentioning there was this person named Ann Marshall. They didn't call it a Dr. Marshall because they wanted to be sure I knew there was, in fact, someone named Ann. They also mentioned that there was this person named Ann Henry who would be coming if they played their cards right. But it was because I'd spent a few years in New Haven in the early 70s, I was pretty used to being the only woman in the room to take Ashley Schneider's wonderful title. I do, though, in fairness, want to say that none of those meetings would have happened without Marianne Culp, Roxanne Levengood, Marion Threadgill, and Polly Sharp. I mean, they were running the school superbly, yeah. And I'm sorry none of them are with us tonight, but David was my last meeting, and of course it was absolutely wonderful. And he had the good sense or judgment to offer me a job, and here we are, David. So I didn't meet Kay, though. I didn't get to meet Kay till I actually arrived on campus. And my first real memory of talking to Kay, and this is a coeducation memory, was I was in tears because I had moved into Dutch. I was the first resident of Dell Village, and we got the occupancy permit, but there were no washing machines. Now, this may not speak to some of you in the audience as powerfully as it will speak to the other half of the audience. I was starting a new job. I had lots of meetings to go to, and I couldn't do my laundry in my building. And it was really, really upsetting me. And I ran into Kay, and that's when she and I first bonded. You understood exactly why I was really upset. And that led to a friendship with both of them that I want to say, for those of you who are wondering, is it okay to move around and change careers? I was 45 years old when I came to Hill. And I made, within that first year, in Kay and David, and Rick and Karen Walbridge, and so many others, the best friends I have ever had in my life. In fact, I'm going to confess something that Kay and Karen and I have not really admitted before, always in public. We made a bond, and part of what got us all through those years, the three of us, the three Ks, we went out to dinner off campus, just the three of us, one night a month, all year, no matter what else was happening. And we stuck to that, so much so that actually David and Rick got a little jealous and asked to go with us. And we finally let them come once or twice, I remember. So I arrived in the this is not about me, believe it, but it has been so far. So anyway, I got here in the beginning of their 7th year at Hill, the 7th year of David's year as head of school, 1 year into coeducation. And Kay and David were so clearly partners, and yet they were also such powerfully self-sufficient individuals. It was one of those wonderful relationships of true equals that is the kind that creates the greatest bonds. Much as they love to run together, travel together, go to baseball games together, David is an English teacher in his heart and soul, and Kay is a math teacher in her heart and soul, which means they're very different people in their own way. But what they are both is teachers. And they are teachers, and they value teaching, and that is one of the great gifts, one of the stars they always, to this day, I know, steer by, understanding the value of education, the value of teaching, and their deep respect for the profession. As a team, they were precisely what Hill needed to preside over the enormous changes of the 90s and to bring Hill through the coeducation process. They were deeply experienced school people with a depth of organization and institutional experience. And they brought the school through so very much, more than some of you will ever fully know, who weren't part of some of those meetings when things didn't always go wrong, because running a school means you deal with tragedy, genuine tragedy. You deal with really hard decisions that have to be made, and you keep going through the best and the worst of it. And one of the things that in my research I found was a beautiful quotation from David that I hadn't heard in a long time, but he talked about one of the things he brought to Hill and his work at Hill was his awareness of the deep paradox when you're dealing with a community like Hill. He said its students, its alumni, its faculty, its all its stakeholders want it to be the leader, the best, the cutting edge of education. But they also want it to stay exactly the same it was when they were here. They don't even, the sixth formers don't want us to change a thing. We're destroying their traditions. It's, and so then that's the paradox you live with. When you look at the enormous changes of the past 25 years, and longer than that Kay and David brought, Hill School was blessed to have people with the wisdom, integrity, and kindness, the humor, and the zest for the experience, the infectious love for people, especially people aged 14 to 19. I talked to one of the young women who's not with us tonight, and I asked her, I said, I'm going to introduce Kay and David tonight. She said, I said, what should I say? She said, describe them as the endlessly, inexhaustibly compassionate and loving people they were, who made each of us feel as if we were a child of theirs. And that it was because of the gift of them, Hill was able to make the bold choice it did, Courtney, to use your phrase, and because they had just the right leaders. Hill had exactly who they needed in Kay and David Dougherty, and that's why we're all here tonight. So it is my deep honor. So who's going first? You? May I introduce you? Kathryn Dougherty, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Wow. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you. And Kathleen, from the bottom of our hearts, we are so grateful to be here under your leadership, really. Let me begin by saying what a thrill it is for David and me to be back at the Hill for a celebration of its 25-year-old history as a co-educational school. However, as I say those words, I can hardly believe them. Can it really be that long ago that David and I, with Jay Gundy and Hans Mentz, traveled around the country visiting with alumni of the school, asking what they would like their school to look like in the future? The result, of course, was the decision to invite girls to join us for the fall of 1998. And because I was one of 5 admission counselors that year, I, along with Greg Buckles, our leader, Lawrence Crimmins, Tom Eccleston, Megan Fonts, and administrative assistants Louise Bidden and Kim Marburger, felt the responsibility of that decision in a most profound and very, very practical way. In visit after visit, interview after interview, application after application, we heard so many stories from families who described in beautiful detail why they, as students or parents, wanted to be part of this historic decision. For sure, there were uncertainties. It always takes a great deal of faith and trust and courage to be the first. And many of the girls, as you might expect, especially the 13 entering sixth form, were leaving schools where as seniors, they would hold significant leadership positions. And so they wondered, for example, how would a decision to attend the Hill affect their college admission status? And because the Hill, since its founding in 1851, had been all boys, they wondered if the boys would be welcoming or would they resent the presence of girls. These are only 2 of the hundreds of questions we in the admission office, right, Tom? We admission counselors answered day after day throughout that 1997-1998 school year. That said, once all the decisions were made and we knew exactly which girls were going to join us that fall, we celebrated. How, you ask? Greg arranged for all of us to take a ride in a hot air balloon. As you can imagine, some of us were more excited about this decision than others. But luckily, on the day chosen for this flight, the weather that spring day was sunny and warm. And once we were up, we had the adventure of a lifetime. We all felt the significance and importance of the decisions we had made. And now finally, we were able, in a most dramatic way, to rejoice in those decisions with hoots and hollers in the blue skies overhead. Then on another spectacularly beautiful day, opening day that fall, we welcomed new students to a campus that would now house our boarding schools in the Marjorie Potts Wendell Dormitory, the only dorm on campus named for a woman, the wife of former Headmaster James I. Wendell. I can't begin to tell you the pride and joy we all felt that day. Everyone in the school had worked so hard to make certain we were ready for this important transition. And I promise you, we were really ready in every possible way. As I thought about what I wanted to say tonight, I found myself reflecting on every little event of that 98-99 school year. And I finally concluded that what I really wanted you to know was what the girls themselves thought about their school year experiences, their first week, indeed that first year. So I asked some of them. Obviously, I couldn't call on every girl, but I chose a couple from each form. Let me mention the themes I saw in their responses, and then I will share some of their words with you. The first theme was one of confidence, that the Hill School would help and support them in this important transition to a new school. These girls believed from the get-go that if there were problems like homesickness or feeling unprepared academically, somehow someone would be there to assist. And in their responses, it was clear that there were always those individuals. Teachers, advisors, classmates, roommates, or dorm parents who helped them find a way to manage and overcome the problems that any student might face at a new school, and those unique and unusual to these circumstances too. Second, the girls never mentioned not being accepted by the boys. Instead, across the board, they talked about the friendships they formed almost right away with many of their male classmates. I believe that because the girls enthusiastically embraced the culture of the Hill, the honor system, a belief in hard work, an understanding of the significance of our rivalry with Lawrenceville, the value of seated meals, and so on, there was no reason that boys would feel that the girls were going to change everything. And I want to emphasize that the girls did not go along just because the boys wanted them to. They themselves saw and understood what these traditions and customs would mean both to their overall experience at the Hill and to their lives afterwards. It really was truly remarkable. Here's the third thing. In spite of the fact that one might naturally have described these girls as independent and courageous for their willingness to take on a new school, new friends, new everything, to be part of a school that for almost 150 years had been an all-boys school, they still wrote at length about how vitally important being a part of a team was to their settling in process. Be it a sports team, the Hill Trebles, a theatrical troupe, artists working on a project or a club, each girl said that that connection to a small group was key to their adjustment to their life at the Hill. And finally, the fourth theme had to do with the life lessons the girls learned while at the Hill and how valuable and beneficial those lessons were to these students as they navigated life at and after Hill. Whether in the school's motto, whatsoever things are true, or we love you and eat your spinach, they now, young women, enthusiastically embrace those same lessons as they live their lives as adults, professionals, parents, or members of their communities. In fact, in all of their relationships. Now let me share some of their own words with you. In answer to my question, what were some of the highlights of your first year? Number one, playing on a hockey team for the first and last time in my life. None of the boys would talk to me because my brother had warned them that they would be in trouble if they so much as looked in my direction. Number three, I remember stressing over finding skirts that would fall 1 to 2 inches above mid-knee. My roommate Eva, an exchange student from the Czech Republic, was the sweetest person ever. Number 5, sixth form tea with faculty and other classmates in the Headmaster's garden. A field trip to the cloisters in New York City as part of the Women in Medieval Literature course taught by Dr. Ann Marshall and Mark Rigg. The routine of seated meals and Tuesday and Thursday chapel, and of course, Lawrenceville Week. To the question, what did you feel were the most important lessons taught valued, and emphasized at the Hill? Number one, I was taught to speak my mind and to speak with conviction. As a relatively shy, it's not sly, I promise you it wasn't sly, shy teenager at the time, I truly admired my classmates who would give chapel talks to the entire school and would have adult conversations with faculty members at seated meals. I'm encouraging my son to do the same. Number two, Hill was the first time I experienced classes where you didn't just learn the subject, but in addition were given the opportunity to look at a topic from all angles, like Harkness table discussions of Beowulf, Brave New World, and Reverend Benzinger's Religion and Literature course, where we were pushed to understand how literature was shaped by culture, society, and theology, and covered a range of works, When Bad Things Happen to Good People, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and A Clockwork Orange. Number three, the Hill was an experience I could never put into words. People think of boarding schools as being snobby and cold. At the Hill, that couldn't be further from the truth. The biggest thing that stood out for me here was feeling a family. I knew it was different. I knew it was different when I received a phone book with the teachers' numbers, addresses, and information about their families. At my former school, that was unheard of. I remember, because I had been sick for a few days, Mr. Parker coming to my dorm to ask if I had any math questions. Probably not. The Logores taking me in and treating me as their own daughter. Mrs. Dougherty putting her arm around me as I walked back to my dorm crying from being homesick, and the list goes on. And number four, for me, the most valuable lessons were taught outside the classroom. I learned to trust my friends, I learned to create bonds with teachers, and I learned that even though I was different, I was still an asset to whatever space I inhabited. I can't begin to tell you how much I enjoyed hearing from these young women. And though, as one put it, not every day was a walk in the park, I believe they feel extremely fortunate to have been among Hill's first group of girls. And now, with 25 years of perspective, appreciate their experience in a way that reaches way beyond its importance as a historical event. And let me end by applauding again the girls who made the courageous and bold decision to attend the Hill School in the fall of 1998. As another student stated so well, I viewed our historical steps into coeducation as the most unbelievable opportunity, one which I never took for granted. I wouldn't be the person I am today without the experiences I had there. I had space to try new things without fear of failure. I learned how to be a leader, and most importantly in today's world, I learned to be a critical thinker. Thank you all.
Thank you. You all are too kind. I had not expected to spend 2.5 days with a lump in my throat. but I have. This has been one of the most touching and memorable experiences of my life. And to be able to share it with Kay as we have, it's been extraordinary. I think because we're all friends, we're family, I can share with you a little bit of a secret. I only this past week finally agreed at Kay's insistence that I be fitted for a hearing aid. And I said, well, this would be a good test. We're going to be talking to a lot of people. We're going to be in noisy rooms. But it has been a revelation to me. And I realized after a while here, I had no idea how nice you all were. So I'm glad I could hear you. It was... Kathy, thanks so much for your kind introduction. Kathleen, thank you so much for inviting us here for this weekend and for your leadership in celebrating the 25th anniversary of Coeducation. Thanks to you all for being here, and thanks for letting us share with you your reunion. So many of you were seeing one another for a long time, for the first time in a long time, and you were, many of you, on ground zero of coeducation and know exactly what you experienced and what we have been talking about for the last couple of days. So thank you. Honestly, there's no other place on earth I would rather be right now. The Phillies, of course, are playing downtown, but this is honestly the place that we'd most rather be. I have to say that if in 1998, when we first enrolled girls and young women at the Hill, if I could have imagined then this time and this year, I would have most wanted to imagine that a Kathleen Devaney would be the leader of our school. So to you, Mark, Emmett, Samantha, we are so glad you are here. And we wish you all the luck that you have already begun to bring to all of us. So thank you. Of course, tonight, if I had imagined it 25 years ago, I would have very much have wanted to share this evening and this lectern with my best friend and chair of the Board of Trustees, Charlie Frank, who was the spirit and the determination behind all of this. His widow, Betty, is here tonight, and I bless her for being here to experience all of this. And I would have wanted to share this hour with Rick and Harry. I'm so sorry that they are not here, but I'm so grateful to Karen for joining us this evening as well. And I think it's appropriate to single out whom I call the founding mothers of all of this, Jennifer and Anne, Margie and Ellen. I don't think that Maria or Donna are here tonight, but those four need to be recognized for being with all of this before, during, and after coeducation began here. So special thanks to them. Founding mothers, that doesn't sound quite exactly, but it's the best I could do. I begin now by recalling a late afternoon in the early summer of 1997 when I stood just outside the main entrance to the dining hall at a chain link fence there, staring across at a hulking pile of rubble the remnants of old middle school, a massive 3-story dormitory built in 1884, which had been leveled by a wrecking ball several weeks before, clearing the way for the new academic building and the coeducation of the Hill. I was soon joined quietly there by Mark Rigg out for a walk, our young but wise English teacher, who gave words to our feelings. You know, he said, you can't put that old building back together again. There's no turning back. And Mark might have added, you can't change your mind about girls at the Hill either. Indeed, with our decision in April 1997 to enroll girls and young women at the school and to demolish a century-old building, we were marching boldly into a whole new era for the Hill School, one with exciting possibilities, but plenty of risks too. We should not forget those risks. Would girls come to Rust Belt Pottstown? Would young women teachers? If they did, would our robust male culture adapt to girls and young women? They do it, or both to each other? Could we compete for students with other co-ed schools, with Hotchkiss or Deerfield, and not just with boys' schools, with Salisbury or Avon Old Farms? Could we raise the money from alums to fund it? Make no mistake, this could have failed. Venerable, historic, highly successful schools and colleges fail. In the last 5 years, over 50 colleges have closed their doors. Iconic businesses fail. Kodak failed. Sears failed. Blockbuster, Toys R Us, Pan Am, J.C. Penney failed. The Hill School could fail, and we knew that. Instead, we succeeded. I think so, but so do many others. Those who have attended the school, those here now, competitor schools, and by almost every objective measure, we thrived, though certainly not without problems or challenges. All of that I'm very proud of. Tonight, I'd like to point to 5 important decisions, some quite unconventional, that in retrospect were pivotal to that success, transforming this wonderful place we celebrate tonight. First, in communicating with our alumni about the future of the school and in seeking their support, we went off the grid almost immediately. Rather than mailing a general announcement or query to our 10,000 alumni, we're thinking about admitting girls to the Hill. What do you think? Setting off a firestorm of emotional reaction. 4 of us, Kay and I, Jay and Hans Mentz, traveled quietly around the country, beginning in the spring of 1996, meeting with focus groups of 10 to 15 carefully selected alums and past parents of the school in about 25 different cities from coast to coast, briefing them with detailed, even confidential data about our school and our competitors, Hotchkiss, Deerfield, Lawrenceville, Taft, and St. Andrews, and explaining where the Hill stood in terms of admissions, standardized test scores, college admissions, endowments, annual fund, and capital fundraising, compared to the very best boarding schools of our size and culture. We did not fare well. One fact to them was stunning. NAIS reported to us that in 1996, of the 5,000 or so young people who attend boarding school each year, a tiny number, only 6 to 7%, would even consider attending a single-sex school. Talk about a niche market. Some of those alums we spoke with were crushed. How did this happen? Others said they'd known it for years. We're just talking about it now. Even so, we didn't ask those 350 men and women we're thinking about admitting girls to the Hill, what do you think? Instead, we asked, in your judgment, what do you think we should do to assure that the Hill School is truly excellent? A very different question. To be truly excellent, they answered emphatically, we must enroll the most able students. And to most of them, that meant both boys and girls. That meant, as young alum Jim Alexandra whispered at a Philadelphia focus group, the C word. In response at those sessions, about 10% of the participants said that if the school goes co-ed, you'll never get another nickel from me. Another 10% said that until the school goes co-ed, you'll never get a nickel from me. 80%, the great majority, said, David, Kay, do whatever it takes to make the school truly excellent again, and we'll support you. We, of course, eventually engaged all of our alumni with our plans, but if we had begun, as had many schools in similar circumstances, by encouraging an open debate among 10,000 men, young and old, the process would have been very different. Second, beginning in 1996, as part of a strategic planning exercise led by Rick Hilton, we studied every possible response to the question, what can we do to assure that the Hill School is truly excellent? But we did so in an unorthodox way. Backed by helpful consultants in the NAIS supporting us with objective data, including comparisons with other outstanding boarding schools, we tested all of the ways we might achieve excellence. We modeled, of course, a school of 450 boys and girls, but also a school of all boys, 350 of them, a kind of distilled all-boys school. We tested teaming with a coordinate school, merging with a girls' boarding school, and even moving the school to another site. All could have worked, but which one would have been truly excellent and truly Hill? We didn't publicize this kind of study. It might have scared people witless, but we did it. Finally, we were directed by the Board of Trustees to prepare one option for a comprehensive review in April 1997 at a retreat in Orlando, Florida, where a trustee, a Disney executive, was our host. True, Orlando seemed incompatible with our serious deliberations. In a hotel over which gigantic statues of Donald Duck and Goofy loomed. But over 3 days, trustees and school administrators reviewed every detail of our report, pouring through a briefing notebook assembled by supercharged Rick Hilton and exacting Jim Pugh, predictably cross-referenced and cross-referenced, divided by multicolored tabs and important sticky notes, a notebook that very few of us were actually able to lift. But by God, we'd studied it, all in advance of our agreed-upon deadline of 10 a.m. Saturday morning, when one trustee would move the question. Be it resolved, in the fall of 1998, the Hill School will enroll girls and young women in its student body. You know, of course, that the motion passed. But you may not know, in fact, only those of us in the room that morning know, that at the moment the motion was offered, I saw all of those men, all trustees, all alumni of the school, at one instant, involuntarily drop their heads and put them in their hands. They were about to make the most important decision in the nearly 150-year history of the school. They took that charge, they took that responsibility very, very seriously and solemnly. The motion passed. Of my memories of that weekend, however, one even more moved me. Speaking passionately, Trustee Emeritus Bill Runyon worried about a dramatic change at the school, that the fundamental character, the culture, the spirit, mystique, discipline, toughness, commitment to whatsoever things are true, the uniqueness of the Hill, what he called the hillness of the Hill, would be lost. It was a word I had never heard before, but I was genuinely touched by his fear and vowed to protect the hillness of the Hill. It took me a while, but here's how I eventually expressed it in countless times. I said that schools like ours are informed by a fundamental paradox. The people who attend a great old school want it to be first-rate, cutting edge, a leader in education, at the same time that they want it to be exactly the way it was when they themselves were students. And as with all paradoxes, there is a core of truth to this one, and I think I understood it. I believed that we could do both. I swore to respect and maintain the core values, the ideals, the principles, the hillness of the Hill, at the same time that we made it truly excellent, a leader in independent school education in the 21st century. Third, at the Orlando retreat, our board reaffirmed another resolution, one to which they had earlier agreed, but which was arguably the most unorthodox, the riskiest. Schools typically mount major capital fundraisers when their fortunes are high, their future bright and clear, not at a time of uncertainty. We did it anyway, with the boldness that only Charlie Frank and Vice Chair of the Board Everett Sherrill could summon. To assure the future excellence of the school, and in effect to fund coeducation, we would ask our alumni and friends to support a capital campaign of $70 million, the first comprehensive capital campaign in the school's history. Plainly put, we would say to our 10,000 alumni, please support an extremely ambitious campaign. And, by the way, we're making the first major change in the student body of the school in almost 150 years. Why? Well, we had to build new dormitories, in time the Dell Village. We had to pay for that new academic building, which in heft and seriousness had to stand up to 3 other buildings in our historic quad, the Alumni Memorial Chapel, Ryan Library, and Upper School. We wouldn't do this on the cheap. Moreover, to move expeditiously on those projects, the Board of Trustees, by design and temperament conservative, agreed for the first time in the school's history to borrow from a bank $20 million, a proposal so deftly orchestrated by Trustee Dick Sammis that it was agreed to unanimously. No guts, no glory, we declared. Meanwhile, our faculty and staff, led by Jennifer Legore and Rick Walbridge, undertook a 15-month-long exercise to prepare for the arrival of girls and young women in September of 1998. Jay and Hans, Charlie and Everett, Kay and I and others sought to convince our alumni that this was all a very good idea and that they should help us pay for it. The result? We eventually increased our goal to $75 million to fund the construction of the Mercer Fieldhouse, then to $83 million, and finally closed at $85,494,202. No guts, no glory. 4, what about Jennifer and Rick? With their reverence for the school and their desire to make it truly excellent, they inspired all of us and at the same time led faculty committees over 15 months in the grunt work that led to our success. Early in their planning, they made one recommendation, unorthodox and risky, that to me was the decision fundamental to our success. They urged us to admit not just 40 boarding and 10 day girls for the first year, but to enroll them at all 4 forms, not just the 3rd or the 4th forms, like most other schools we knew, but 5th and 6th formers too. Jennifer and Rick believed that we needed older girls to lead those 14-year-old girls, and so recommended that we recruit a dozen senior young women, all leaders, to be prefects on the dormitory. Greg Buckles and his team, including Tom Eccleston and Kay, in the admission office, took the cue and recruited 12 outstanding young pioneer women leaders. But Greg and his team assumed another responsibility, our number one goal overall, attracting the most able students to the school, girls and boys, an exciting but unenviable job. However, they soon understood, better than the rest of us, the possibilities. We could indeed be truly excellent, but sooner than expected. Within weeks of accepting applications for the fall, Greg told me that we could enroll far more very able candidates, not just 50. Of course, we were thrilled, but cautioned against getting ahead of ourselves or beyond the capacity of Wendell Dorm, though many candidates agreed to live in corner triple rooms of Wendell just to attend the Hill. Ultimately, 89 girls and young women arrived on September 8, 1998, members of the first co-ed class in the history of the school. About those dozen intrepid prefects about whom Kay has already spoken, we also believed that they needed a leader, a 13th senior, to arrive as head prefect for the girls. On Greg's recommendation, they selected Krista Anderson, daughter of a Hill alumnus, an outstanding student, Stanford bound, a leader of her school in Seattle. And with determination and humility, Krista accepted the job. No surprise, she was a leader. Of my many memories of Krista Anderson, one stands out. The Friday night of Lawrenceville weekend that fall, at a dinner in Sweeney Gymnasium to celebrate our historic rivalry with Lawrenceville, begun in 1887, but now coeducated, to promote our $70 million capital campaign, and to encourage Hill alums' acceptance of coeducation. Certainly, there were skeptics in the ranks. 900 people filled Sweeney Gymnasium for the event, to which our sixth form president, Dante Catrona, welcomed them in a short, gracious, and earnest speech, just what you'd expect of Dante. He'd read the room. He knew why they were there. He then introduced Krista Anderson, who in all the beauty of her humanity, with a tiny but firm voice that filled the room, thanked people for being there that night, told them about her dad and about the Hill School she'd heard about all her life, its traditions and ideals and principles, those whatsoever things that are true, about her decision to leave home 3,000 miles away, attend that school, and in time to accept the position of head prefect for the girls. I don't recall a literal spotlight on her that night. Certainly she was in a kind of one. But I still want to picture her in a dimly lighted gym, surrounded by hundreds of old Hill boys, with some kind of Old Testament light beaming on her. And not until she had concluded her remarks did anyone actually breathe. It was an incandescent moment. I knew that Krista, with Dante's gracious support, had ordained a new day at our school. Fifth, with our games against Lawrenceville that next day, we tested the last and important, slightly risky decision we made in coeducating the Hill School. It was in part about sports, but much more about school culture, or the Hillness of the Hill. From the outset, I was certain of our faculty's ability to elevate the school's historic excellence in the classroom. They were champing at the bit to do that. But I was uncertain how we'd fare in sports, with just 50 girls playing soccer, tennis, and cross country, all at the varsity, not the JV level, and a smaller number of boys than usual, only about 350 that year, playing their rigorous athletic schedule. Like it or not, sports are key to school morale and identity. Fortuitously, by enrolling a larger number of girls, we could, albeit fairly late in the admission process, offer another sport to our girls. And we did. Field hockey. It was risky on short notice, but ultimately fateful. It began with the appointment of a coach. I had not spoken with Jennifer Sparacchio for 2 minutes before I wanted her to be our coach. I actually wanted to play field hockey myself. Jennifer was both joyful and introspective. As a coach, she was also incredibly demanding, disciplined, tough, hill tough, rallying to unimaginable excellence a group of girls who in early practice had never met one another or known the school that they would represent. In the first weeks of the fall, when everyone was still adapting to girls in blue and gray, Jennifer's team lost by a goal to Agnes Irwin, tied Baldwin and Germantown Academy, and beat Friends Central, all very strong opponents. Many heads turned, but especially looked ahead to November, to our game against Lawrenceville, the first in our history since, 1887. Remember, for 11 years at Coed Lawrenceville, their girls and young women, half of their student body, were relegated to the sidelines as cheerleaders in the 5th oldest school rivalry in the country. Just the guys played games. What kind of rivalry is that? At the Hill, we all wondered whether our girls would get this rivalry, be tough enough in ways at the core of Hillness. And we wondered about Lawrenceville girls too. How would they regard it? From the opening whistle, it was clear that both teams got it. Faces grease-painted blue and gray, red and black, appearing and acting fearless. and playing with an inexhaustible passion and pride. To me now, it remains one of the most inspired, emotional school games I've ever seen. And over 44 years, I've seen a lot of them. With 5 minutes left in the game, the score was 0-0, with numbing attacks advanced and turned away. And then Lawrenceville scored, then turned our girls away again and again and again. But the whistle blew. Lawrenceville had won the game 1-0. We all stood drained. What now? The girls knew what to do. Our girls, grease paint rolling with tears down their faces, hugged one another, and then walked over and hugged their grease-painted, bone-weary opponents. They all got it. And for the first time in that first year of coeducation, I cried too. It was too much. That moment was not just the culmination and justification of one of our decisions in that historic year. It was about pure excellence at our great school. I said to myself then, God, I love this place. And I love our kids. We have the greatest kids. And all of that helped me understand our true mission in seeking true excellence at our school, in helping to raise wonderful young men and women. In the coming months, I finally found the words to express it, and what I was about as an educator, and what I think about the Hill then and now, the hillness of the Hill. I said then that great parents and great school teachers say to kids all day, every day, in countless ways, the simple words, I love you, and eat your spinach. That to me was our school. We would tell kids how much we cared about them, loved them, at the same time that we said, guys, girls, there are some things you have to do even if you don't want to do them, because they're good for you. That to me is the hillness of the Hill. Thanks again for being here tonight. Thanks for celebrating with Kay and me and Kathleen. And for Hill, dear old Hill, I love you all.